My name is Sarah, and this is a story I never thought I'd have to tell. The events that took place during my senior year of high school in Los Angeles changed my life forever. Even now, when I think about those days, I shudder. But after all these years, I feel I need to share this story, perhaps to let others know that sometimes the most terrifying monsters aren't the ones hiding under our beds, but the ones living among us. It all started on an ordinary September day. I had just turned 17 and was eagerly anticipating the start of my senior year. Our high school, Westwood High, was one of the best in Los Angeles, and I was proud to be a student there. That morning, I woke up as usual, had my breakfast, and headed to school. The weather was warm and sunny, just like most days in Los Angeles. But I didn't know that this day would be the beginning of a nightmare that would haunt me for a long time. When I entered the schoolyard, I noticed something was different. There was an unusual buzz among the students. Everyone was gathered in small groups, talking in hushed tones. I became curious and approached my best friend Emily, who was standing by the entrance. "What's going on?" I asked Emily. Emily looked at me with wide eyes and said, "Haven't you heard? They found one of the teachers' bodies in the storage room behind the gym." My heart sank. "What? Who? How?" Emily shook her head. "I don't know the details. I just know it was Ms. Thompson, the biology teacher. They say the school janitor found her body early this morning." Ms. Thompson was one of the most popular teachers in the school. She always had a smile on her face and treated students with kindness. I couldn't believe she was dead. At that moment, the school's loudspeaker crackled to life, and everyone fell silent. Mr. Johnson's voice, our principal, echoed across the yard. "Attention, please. All students are requested to go to their classrooms. We will have an emergency meeting with the teachers, and more information will be provided to you afterward. Please remain calm." Emily and I exchanged glances and headed to our classrooms. Throughout the day, various rumors circulated about Ms. Thompson's death. Some said she had committed suicide. Others believed it was murder, but no one knew the truth. Later that afternoon, all students were gathered in the assembly hall. Mr. Johnson, with a grim face, stood behind the podium and began to speak. "Dear students, it is with great sadness that I must inform you that Ms. Thompson, our beloved biology teacher, passed away last night on school grounds. The police are investigating this incident and have asked us not to discuss the details until further notice. School counselors are available to meet with any of you who need to talk." The sound of crying and sobbing could be heard from various corners of the hall. I felt a lump in my throat too. Ms. Thompson was supposed to be my mentor this year, and I was very fond of her. That night, when I returned home, I couldn't stop my thoughts. What had happened to Ms. Thompson? Why would anyone want to harm her? Was this an accident or something worse? In the days that followed, a heavy atmosphere settled over the school. Police were frequently seen on school grounds, questioning students and staff. Rumors continued, but no one knew what had really happened. About a week after Ms. Thompson's death, another strange incident occurred. I was walking from the library to my class when I heard a scream from the girls' bathroom. I rushed toward the sound and saw one of the underclassmen, Lisa, coming out of the bathroom, pale as a ghost. "What happened?" I asked worriedly. Lisa said in a trembling voice, I saw Ms. Thompson in the mirror." My heart stopped. "What? How is that possible?" Lisa started crying. "I don't know. I was washing my hands when I suddenly saw her reflection in the mirror. It was like she was looking at me. When I turned around, no one was there. I didn't know what to say. Had Lisa hallucinated, or had she really seen something? Either way, I took her to the counseling office to talk to someone. This incident was the beginning of a series of strange events at school. In the following days, other students also claimed to have seen Ms. Thompson in various corners of the school. Some said they heard her voice from empty classrooms. Others said they saw her shadow in the hallway. I tried to think rationally. Surely all of this was due to shock and grief. But I couldn't help feeling scared and worried. Every time I passed by the storage room behind the gym, I felt like someone was watching me. One night, about 2 weeks after Ms. Thompson's death, Emily and I had stayed late at school to work on our science project. It was past 8 p.m., and the school was almost empty. We were packing up our things when we heard a strange noise from the hallway. "What was that?" Emily asked fearfully.
If you enjoyed it so far, please hit the subscribe button if you liked the video.
"I don't know. Maybe it's the janitor, I said, but I wasn't sure myself. We cautiously left the classroom. The hallway was dark, with only a few emergency lights on. The sound came again, this time clearer. It sounded like someone was crying. "Sarah, let's go back. I'm scared," Emily pleaded. But my curiosity was stronger than my fear. "Let's just see what it is. Maybe someone needs help." We slowly moved toward the sound. As we got closer, the crying became clearer. It seemed to be coming from the biology lab, where Ms. Thompson used to teach. My heart was pounding. I put my hand on the doorknob and slowly turned it. The door opened with a creaking sound. What we saw will be etched in my mind forever. In the middle of the lab, with her back to us, stood a woman with long hair and a white dress. Her shoulders were shaking as if she was crying. Emily let out a small scream and covered her mouth. The woman slowly turned towards us and, my God, her face was exactly like Miss Thompson's, but pale and with eyes that seemed to bulge out of their sockets. "Help me!" A weak and hoarse voice came from her mouth. Emily and I, without even thinking, started running. We ran through the hallways at full speed and made it to the schoolyard. We stood by my car, panting. Was that Ms. Thompson?" Emily asked in a trembling voice. No, it's impossible. We must have hallucinated," I tried to be rational, but I didn't believe it myself. That night, neither of us could sleep. The next morning, we went to school with fear and trepidation. We didn't know if we should tell anyone what we had seen. Would anyone believe us? But when we got to school, we realized that something else had happened. The police were back on school grounds, and this time, they were examining the biology lab. Mr. Johnson gathered everyone in the assembly hall again. This time, his face was even more serious than before. "Dear students, unfortunately, I have to bring you more bad news. Last night, another one of our teachers, Mr. Rogers, lost his life in the biology lab." A sound of shock and amazement rose from the crowd. Mr. Rogers was the chemistry teacher and a close colleague of Ms. Thompson. Mr. Johnson continued, "The police are investigating this incident. Until further notice, lab classes are canceled, and we ask all of you to stay away from the laboratories." Emily and I looked at each other in horror. Was what we had seen last night related to Mr. Rogers' death? In the days that followed, the school atmosphere became even heavier than before. Everyone was talking about what had happened. Some said there was a serial killer in the school. Others believed we were cursed. Emily and I decided we had to tell someone what we had seen. After much thought, we decided to talk to Ms. Murphy, the school counselor. She had always been a rational and trustworthy person. When we told Ms. Murphy about the previous night, she listened carefully to our words. After we finished, she remained silent for a while. "Girls, I know these days have been difficult for all of us. Sometimes our minds see things that aren't real in stressful situations," Ms. Murphy said in a calm tone. "But we really saw her," Emily insisted. Ms. Murphy nodded. "I believe that you saw something, but perhaps what you saw was something other than what you think. In any case, I will report this to the police. They are investigating all aspects." When we left Ms. Murphy's office, we felt confused. Had we really been mistaken? That night, I decided to do some research. I started searching the internet for similar incidents in other schools. After hours of searching, I came across an old article that caught my attention. The article was about an incident that had occurred 20 years ago at another high school in Los Angeles. In that incident, a biology teacher named Elizabeth Thompson, yes, the same last name as our Miss Thompson, and one of her colleagues had lost their lives in a laboratory accident. According to reports, they were working on a secret experiment that apparently involved research on life after death. My heart started racing. Was this a coincidence? Was our Ms. Thompson related to that Elizabeth Thompson? The next day, I decided to investigate further on my own. After school, under the pretext of working on my project, I stayed in the library. When I was sure no one was paying attention to me, I went to the old school archives. Among the old files, I was looking for anything that could give me a clue. After hours of searching, I finally found something that took my breath away. An old photo of school staff from 20 years ago. And in that photo, I saw a woman who looked exactly like our Miss Thompson. But the name under the photo was Elizabeth Thompson. With trembling hands, I took the photo and quickly left the library. I had to show this to someone. But to whom? Who would believe me? I decided to talk to Emily first. She was the only one I could trust. I rushed to Emily's house and told her everything. Emily looked at the photo with wide eyes. This is impossible. You mean our Ms. Thompson is the same Elizabeth Thompson? But how is that possible? She should be much older now. I don't know, Emily, but something isn't right here. We need to figure out what's going on, I said with determination. Emily looked at me doubtfully. But how? Who will believe us? Maybe we don't need anyone to believe us. Maybe we should investigate ourselves, I suggested. Emily said fearfully, What do you mean? I mean, we should go back to the lab. Maybe we can find a clue there. Emily shook her head in disagreement. No, it's too dangerous. What if we get caught? Or if we see her again? I know it's dangerous, but if we don't find out what's going on, worse things might happen. You saw what happened to Mr. Rogers, I said. After much discussion, Emily finally agreed to come with me. We decided to go to the lab tomorrow night, after making sure everyone had left the school. That night, sleep didn't come to my eyes. I kept thinking about the photo I had found. How was it possible that our Ms. Thompson was the same Elizabeth Thompson? And if she was, how had she stayed young all these years? The next day at school, I tried to act normal, but every time I passed by the lab, my heart started racing. Were we really going to go there tonight? After classes ended, Emily and I waited in the school parking lot for everyone to leave. It was past 8 p.m. when we finally decided to enter the building. We cautiously walked through the dark hallways. The sound of our footsteps echoed in the night silence. When we reached the lab door, we paused for a moment. Are you sure you want to do this? Emily asked in a trembling voice. I took a deep breath. Yes, we need to find out what's going on. With shaking hands, I turned the doorknob. The door opened with a creaking sound. The lab was shrouded in darkness. We started searching with our phone flashlights. Everything looked normal. Tables, chairs, lab equipment. Everything was in its place. But when we reached Miss Thompson's desk, something caught my attention. A small notebook was stuck under the desk drawer. I carefully removed it and started flipping through it. The pages were full of formulas and scientific notes that I mostly didn't understand. But one sentence on the last page froze the blood in my veins. The experiment was successful. I have discovered eternal life. At that very moment, we heard footsteps from the hallway. Emily and I looked at each other in horror. Someone was approaching the lab. We quickly hid behind one of the tables. The lab door opened and someone entered. Through the gap in the table, I could see who it was. Mrs. Murphy, the school counselor, entered the lab with a worried expression. Elizabeth, are you here? Ms. Murphy's voice echoed in the silence of the lab. My heart stopped. She was calling Ms. Thompson by the name Elizabeth. So our guess was right. Suddenly, there was a rustling sound from the corner of the lab. Ms. Murphy quickly turned towards it. Elizabeth, stop this game. We need to talk. And then I saw something that I will never forget for the rest of my life. From the darkness, a figure with Ms. Thompson's face appeared. But this wasn't the Ms. Thompson we knew. Her skin was pale and wrinkled, as if she had aged years. Sarah, you shouldn't have come here. It was Ms. Thompson's voice, but hoarse and weak. Hearing my name, I jumped. Emily let out a small scream. Ms. Murphy turned towards us in surprise. Kids, what are you doing here? Ms. Murphy asked worriedly. Emily and I fearfully came out from behind the table. Ms. Thompson, or should I say Elizabeth, looked at us with sad eyes. I think it's time you knew everything, Elizabeth said, and started telling a story that was hard for us to believe. She explained that 20 years ago, she and her colleague were working on an experiment to extend life. The experiment was successful, but it had terrible consequences. They had managed to stop aging, but at the cost of losing their humanity. We thought we were serving humanity, but in fact we were cursing ourselves, Elizabeth said in a trembling voice. Ms. Murphy continued, I've been trying to help Elizabeth find a way to reverse this condition for years, but it's too late now, Elizabeth interrupted. I can't continue like this. I can't watch others get hurt because of me. Suddenly I realized, so, Mr. Rogers, Elizabeth lowered her head. He had found out. He wanted to help, but I lost control. A feeling of horror and pity simultaneously overwhelmed me. This woman, who was once a well-intentioned scientist, had now become a creature trapped between life and death. "What happens now?" Emily asked in a trembling voice. Ms. Murphy took a deep breath. "We need to inform the authorities. This situation can't continue." Elizabeth shook her head. "No, I'll end it myself. Tonight." Before we could react, Elizabeth went to the chemical cabinet and picked up a vial. "No!" Ms. Murphy shouted and ran towards her, but it was too late. Elizabeth drank the contents of the vial, and within seconds she started to disintegrate before our eyes. The last thing we heard from her was a whisper. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything." Within minutes, all that remained of Elizabeth Thompson was a pile of ash. That night changed all of our lives forever. The police came to the school and extensive investigations were conducted. The story of Elizabeth Thompson and her experiments spread worldwide as a warning about the dangers of tampering with nature. Emily and I never forgot that night. Sometimes, in my dreams, I still hear Elizabeth's voice saying, "I'm sorry." This experience taught me that sometimes secrets should remain secrets, and that no matter how much science advances, some boundaries should not be crossed. Now, years after that incident, whenever I pass by Westwood High School, I pause for a moment and remember Elizabeth Thompson, a woman who, in her quest for immortality, lost her humanity.